in the 80s representing tobacco attorneys, while Joe Biden is a key senator on this giant tobacco settlement and legislation.
Wow.
Hunter Biden graduates in 1996, immediately goes to work for where? MBNA. People who are a little bit too young might not remember, they were the credit card company in this country. They've since been absorbed by Bank of America, but at the time they were pushing for bankruptcy reform so that people couldn't discharge medical debts, couldn't discharge credit card debts, private student loans, and they make him a senior vice president. So Hunter Biden then serves till 2001, goes and becomes a lobbyist, federal lobbyist, while his dad is a senator.
A very powerful senator.
He's getting earmarks. His firm is representing University of Delaware, paying the firm millions of dollars. University of Delaware is getting tens of millions of dollars in earmarks. And that whole time, he's still getting paid $100,000 a year as a consultant for MBNA.
Wow.
Who knows what he's doing? Biden is leading the push on bankruptcy reform. He finally gets bankruptcy reform enacted in 2005, and then Hunter Biden's consultancy ends in 2005. And actually, after 2005 is when you see the student loan crisis really take off. Student loans anymore, and so private.
On the Ukraine and China. He's
gearing up to run for president, and so he tells his son, according to some reporting at the time, look, can you do something other than be a federal lobbyist? Like, that doesn't really look that great for me. And according to a business partner that ended up filing a complaint after things went sour with him and Hunter and James, Joe Biden called him and said, can you help my son, get into like some investing, some private equity, something that's not federal lobbying. And so Hunter and James and this guy take over this firm called Paradigm Global Advisors. And in one of the first meetings, according to the Politico magazine, James Biden and Hunter Biden and Beau Biden are all there, and they tell the officials there, hey, look, don't worry about clients. We have people lined up who want to invest in Joe Biden, and they're gonna give us their money. Now, Hunter and James Biden say that that's not true. But the Politico magazine had a ton of different sources saying that this is exactly what the guy said.
This is the Biden Inc. story.
This is Biden. So this is James Biden and Hunter Biden getting together in business. Business, of course, explodes. They get involved with Sanford, the Ponzi scheme guy. It's just a complete mess. And so now we're into 2008, 2009. He teams up with John Kerry's stepson to form another private equity firm. And when he gets the offer to be on Burisma's board, this is the Ukrainian gas company, Chris Hines tells him, look, man, don't do this. Looks terrible.
Bad look.
What are you doing? Ukrainian natural gas firm? Your dad is overseeing Ukrainian policy. Right now, he's the vice president. Why do you think... And Biden's like, Hunter Biden says, I'm going to do it anyway. They slap Hunter Biden's face on the front of the website, $50,000 a month. During this $50,000 a month escapade, he's also going on a crack binge, going in and out of rehab, while he's still getting paid. Like, that's an amazing job.
Which is exactly, what Joe Biden stands for in his architecting of the criminal justice system, is for, young people to be given $50,000.
This video with Ryan Grimm is excellent. Now, people like to make this argument about Trump's corruption and everything else, but let's just be clear. Corruption didn't begin when Trump took office. For the most part, we tend to ignore this record of Joe Biden. I mean, Ryan Grimm goes over the course of Joe Biden's political career, and it becomes very clear that whether or not you want to consider Joe Biden corrupt, his family was trading heavily off of his name, and he knowingly allowed such. In one of the interviews, Joe Biden was asked if he talked to his kid about his business affiliations, and Joe Biden says, no, I trust my son. Well, that's not acceptable for the rest of us. And anytime you bring up Hunter, he flies off into a rage. Now, the Republican Party has decided, potentially, to call or subpoena Joe Biden and potentially even Hunter Biden in the Senate trial of Nancy Pelosi ever since the document's over to the Senate. I have no issue with this. Personally, this notion that his crackhead son, who I do feel some kind of way about that, Joe Biden was instrumental in putting people in prison particularly African Americans, for the very specific drug that Joe Biden's son had an affinity for. His son was getting $50,000 a month working for a Ukrainian gas company where he had no experience in Ukraine and no experience in gas. Not to mention what Ryan Grimm said, going on crack binges. The issue was his last name and the fact that his dad was essentially a viceroy of the Ukraine at this point, a submissive Ukrainian government. If you want to say that Trump is corrupt, fair enough, but you also have to own this. I also have no issue with Republicans dragging Hunter into this. It wasn't the Republicans that started the impeachment. The Democratic Party decided to impeach President Trump, and they felt they needed to do so with great urgency. So here we are. By law. Just like the Democrats could craft whatever they wanted in the House, it is up for the Republican Party, since they are the leadership in the Senate, to do as they will. It is not for the House to have a say-so in this process. It is entirely up to the Senate to craft that process the way they want to. And if they want to call Hunter Biden, or if they want to call Joe Biden, they have every legal right to do so, just as the Democrats had a legal right to impeach Trump. Here's the catch. Is Joe Biden above the law? Now, what I'm asking, is Joe Biden above the law? I'm asking if is Joe Biden above the law, because he's been asked twice now. If the Senate sends you a subpoena to testify, will you ignore it? Will you honor it? Or will you, for the most part, defy it? Joe Biden has said he will defy the subpoena. He was asked the second time by Iowa. Will you acquiesce to the law and fulfill the subpoena, your obligations under being subpoenaed? And Joe Biden, for a second time, has said no. And I want you to hear his reason, and whether or not this reason is sufficient, and whether or not this will plague him for the entirety and the rest of his campaign. The Democrats are the ones that asked for impeachment, by the way. And it was this person that said impeachment was going to eat Joe Biden alive. Well, here we are. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Real men can't sleep. Real men do the news. It's 4:54. I am wide awake. So let's get to some of the stories I wanted to get to yesterday. If Joe Biden is given a subpoena, will Joe Biden acquiesce to that subpoena and make himself available for testimony? This is Joe Biden's answer.
Stand by your earlier statements that you wouldn't comply if you were subpoenaed to testify in an impeachment trial before the Senate?
Correct. And the reason I wouldn't is because it's all designed to deal with Trump doing what he's done his whole life, trying to take the focus off him. The issue is not what I did. Not a single person, not one single person, even that Doug Giuliani and his compatriots, have said I did anything other than my job. Every one of the people in the sworn testimony who worked for him said Biden did his job and he did it well. This is all about a diversion.
The problem is that doesn't matter. What do you mean? What do I mean that doesn't matter? The Democratic Party, under the Constitution, had every legal right to impeach Trump. Not saying it was politically correct, not saying I even think the motivation of it was just, but from a legal standpoint, they could do such a thing. Fair enough. They got what they wanted. They came together, they made their vote in order to impeach Trump. God bless. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. I think it's a horrible diversion, but nevertheless, they did it. The Senate, by the same standard, if they subpoenaed you, have every right to subpoena you. You, your party, set the rules for this. They decided to impeach Trump after 2 years of a conspiracy theory that Trump was working with the Russians. Now, your problem is that the Senate could call you as a witness. And after hearing this interview, just might. If it was me, they would.
And we play his game all the time. He's done it his whole career. And I'm very proud of the job I did. I never moved off of dealing with corruption there. Every single person thought that prosecutor general should be fired, from the IMF to all our European partners and the people in the administration. But this is a...
Okay. If that's true, then you can't go and tell them that? I guess my issue here is your party initiated an impeachment hearing. Great. Legally, they could do that. Your party came together, got the votes, and pretty much along a party line, voted to impeach Trump. Fair enough. Now, I would say from day one, many of the members in your party wanted to impeach Trump, and you had a lot of people in the Democratic Party who just hated his guts from outright. And any reason that they could find, they would use. You had some CIA person that dropped information that Donald Trump was making deals in order to go after one of his political opponents. And immediately, the only thing in your head that you could think of to remedy this is, gotta impeach the president. Something that many of the people wanted to do anyway. Mueller didn't get the job done for you, and this conspiracy theory that Trump was working with the Russians, so Ukrainegate came about. You could have censured the president. You have elections next year. This will have negative consequences. And one of those negative consequences that I made very clear months ago was that they are forfeiting Joe Biden in order to impeach Trump. The reason why I said they were forfeiting Biden is because Republicans were going to throw up flack dealing with Ukraine, potentially Hunter, and try to draw attention away from the argument that Democrats want to make. If they indeed subpoena Joe Biden, that in and of itself would be news. Joe Biden's reaction to that subpoena would also be news. Meaning, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Listen to Biden. Let him finish.
The technique he uses all the time. He's a chronic liar.
Doesn't that position you as if you're defying a subpoena, putting yourself above the law?
Well, look, the grounds for them to call me would be overwhelmingly specious. But so I don't anticipate that happening anyway. But what it would do if I went, let's say I voluntarily just said, let me go make my case. What are you going to cover? You guys, instead of focusing, you're going to cover for 3 weeks anything I said. And he's going to get away. You guys buy into it all the time. Not a joke. Think about it. As we say in my church, examine your conscience. Doesn't mean I shouldn't testify if you thought I should, but think what it's about. It's all about what he does all the time, his entire career.
An argument can be made that what Joe Biden is doing here is to try to keep attention off of him and the corruption, if you want to call it soft corruption. I don't want to call it soft corruption because it is what it is what it is. Biden's kids trading off of his name for the entirety of his career. Whatever he wants to say he did in Ukraine or not. Fact of the matter is, if the Senate sends you a subpoena to testify, if your name is Joe Biden and you're on the campaign trail, you need to follow the law. Here's Warren telling Joe Biden the exact same thing. Listen to this.
The subpoenas that have already been issued for Don McGahn and for Mitt Mulvaney, who have firsthand knowledge of what the president did. That's where the testimony should come from in this impeachment trial. But that's the part that Mitch McConnell and the president just don't want to put out there in public, and that's wrong.
But to emphasize, it is a lawful subpoena.
I'm sorry.
Just to emphasize, if a lawful subpoena is issued for Joe Biden in the impeachment trial, you say he should follow.
Yes, he should, and I assume that he will follow.
Yes, he should follow the law. If he gets a subpoena, he should not blow it off. Look, I don't know what the Republican Party is going to do on this. it's possible that they issue a subpoena, but Joe Biden saying that will be overwhelmingly specious. That doesn't really matter, does it? Ultimately, you've impeached the president, and they're going to throw up whatever flack they can in order to protect their president. And either way, you're not going to get the votes. But the catch is this. If it was me, and I saw Joe Biden do that interview, I would submit a subpoena for Joe Biden just because. From a political sense, it does make sense. I mean, ultimately, it was the Democratic Party that pushed for this impeachment. The Republican Party does what they do. They own the Senate. And calling Joe Biden and forcing Joe Biden to either ignore that subpoena or accept that subpoena is a win on either front. Yes, the media, some of them, especially MSNBC, will say there's no reason for Joe Biden to be there, et cetera, et cetera. They would complain, they would bitch, they would moan. But ultimately, what it boils down to is a presidential candidate that, for whatever reason, from the public standpoint, is dodging a subpoena to testify. And it's unclear to me on whether the public looks at that and says, it looks like he has something to hide, and it looks like this thing is kind of hanging over his head, and the issue with Hunter Biden will get talked about that much more. I don't necessarily know if this helps Joe Biden, whether he accepts the subpoena or doesn't accept the subpoena. The questions that he would have to answer if he acquiesces to it, again, like Joe Biden said, he's political aware enough to know we'll get massive media airplay. This notion of Trump getting away, I have no idea what that means. Trump was always going to quote unquote get away as Joe Biden's term because Democrats didn't have the vote in the Senate, and this was overtly partisan in the way that they went about going after him. The defense will also be overtly partisan. This will backfire. God knows this will backfire. I'll leave it here. I don't want to keep this one long. Look, they haven't issued a subpoena for Biden in the Senate, but by that same token, Nancy Pelosi hasn't sent the articles. Will they? I don't know. Will they send one for Hunter Biden? And will that be just as bad for Joe Biden if one is sent for his kid? Yes, that would be horrible for Joe Biden, especially if Hunter Biden sits down and answers questions, because you have a lot of politically savvy Republicans that are looking to take a chunk out of him. This is not good for Biden one way or the other. Doesn't mean he can't get out of it. Nope. Doesn't mean that he has certain political hurdles that he may have to jump, dealing him and his kid. And if you notice, one of the conversations that Ryan Grimm made the point of saying was, Joe Biden knows that his kids are trading on his name, despite him not saying anything about it. Him making the point to the reporters that they always get away with it. This coverage hadn't come from anybody from the standpoint that I know of, with the exception of Ryan Grimm. If I am not mistaken, it wasn't MSNBC, it was CNBC, covered Biden and the Ukraine and the Romanians in China. But not so much of going throughout the course of his life, showing that this trading off of his name is not something that's new. It's something that they just currently saw. I'll leave this here. This is mind-blowing. If Biden gets subpoenaed and he blows that off, that would be astonishing. Like, share,